Assalamu alaikum, family, peace, healing, and a light. And welcome back to another episode of Healing with Angelica's podcast, where we discuss all things healing. And if you are new to the show, welcome, beautiful souls. On today's episode, we have a beautiful soul joining us today, culture educator, circle keeper, and consultant and facilitator of Circle of Roots, Darsheel Kaur. As we'll be discussing today's topic, healing in the village, restoring ourselves through culture and connection. Darsheel, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Peace. I'm glad to be here. I'm doing well, tuning in from Costa Rica. I'm grateful for the technology to be able to have these conversations, across borders.
Oh my God, absolutely. How is Costa Rica right now? Because that's exactly where I need to be.
It's a beautiful day today. I'm on the Caribbean side, and as you can see, it's nice and sunny and warm. Very fresh out here with all of the trees and all of the different plants. Everything's really happy. We've been getting some good rain, so
Yeah.
everything's like nice and lush and fresh.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Praise be to Allah. Oh my gosh, you guys. I'm looking forward to today's episode. We already got the good vibe. My sister's out in Costa Rica, okay? Now listen, we need those types of energy. So Darsheel, again, welcome to the show. I'm glad all is well with you. Looking forward to the show. Now, for those who may not know who you are, do you mind letting our audience know just a little bit more about you?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Darsheel Kaur, and I grew up in the Dayton area in Beaver Creek, actually, but as an immigrant. So my family comes from India, and I was born in England. So my whole life, just kind of, living as an immigrant in the Midwest in the U.S. and just navigating different cultures ended up leading me into a path of healing, activism, and just social awareness, just seeking to heal not only personally but collectively. So that led me to where I am now, to doing conflict transformation work, community healing, and just hosted our first retreat here in Costa Rica last month.
Yay! I love that. Praise be to Allah. How long have you been doing the retreats? You said that was the
Uh,
first one?
that was the first
Oh,
official retreat here in Costa
how
Rica.
was it?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. Dayton was in the house. Shout out to the Love Locks Experiment, Natural Onyx Dimensions. They were my collaborators, and our guests were from Dayton, and we even had some other Dayton friends show up to our live Caribbean funk show
Wow.
that we did at a bar on the beach. So it was really beautiful to just be able to build those connections. I've been coming back here for over a decade, and with Dayton being my hometown, just every time I come here, I'm like, man, I just wish my people could see, like what's possible. So that was like many years of a dream coming true.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I'm so glad you made it happen. I'm looking forward to I'm gonna have to go on the next retreat. So please,
Yes.
I know you guys are already planning. When's the next one?
The next one is going to be in the spring of
Okay.
2026. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm gonna remember that because I definitely would love to even just, experience that. It's just something different when you are not in the same environment anymore. Like I'm pretty sure Costa Rica has a whole different feel than down here in Dayton. So
hmm hmm
I love it. So we're gonna go ahead and get started on today's episode, Healing in the Village. It made me think with you in the background, look like a jungle. But then again, I also like that village vibe that you got back there. So I love it. So again, healing in the village, restoring ourselves through culture and connection. And please, for my audience today, Do not hesitate to put any questions you may have for our guest, Darsheel Kaur, in the comment section below. Okay, engage, engage, engage. So, again, welcome again to another soul nourishing episode where healing is communal, cultural, and deeply personal. This space is rooted in truth and tradition, created to remind us that we were never meant to do this alone. In this episode, Healing in the Village, Restoring Ourselves Through Culture and Connections, we're honored to be joined by the radiant Darsheel Kaur. Here, wisdom and live experience offers us a deeper understanding of how culture, connections, and ancestral remembrance can guide us back to wholeness. Get ready for a conversation that touches the soul and reawakens the spirit within us. So that brings me to my first question. I want to kind of dive a little more deep into just how your journey began in starting your work as, being a culture educator. You're a holistic healing practitioner. You do conflict transformations. Like, where did your journey begin in those endeavors?
Yeah, I think my whole life has kind of led me to what I'm doing, just kind of as I mentioned earlier, growing up in Beaver Creek, which is like a predominantly white area, is kind of so, at the time it was more homogenous than it is now, so mostly people operating, living of similar cultures and backgrounds. So being like kind of a different person, looking different, sounding different, eating different, smelling different, just kind of gave me a certain perspective of the world. And then 9/11 happened when I was in middle school. And so just getting that experience of feeling like targeted and othered and feeling like an outsider, and then eventually, getting into activism in college, started to develop my own voice and realize like, oh, when I come together with others, there's an energy that can be produced beyond what I can produce alone. So I started to understand the power of the collective. Um, with the activism. But then from that journey, having to go down my own healing journey, started to have some health problems,
Mm-hmm.
which were actually found out later, like just showing me deeper emotional and spiritual problems that that I had never addressed from my childhood. So then I started on my own personal healing journey, and that led me to changing my diet, changing my whole relationship with food, and just what I consume as a whole. Media, my just checking my environment, what kind of products I'm using on my skin, just everything, holistically addressing things. And then I wanted to combine these two worlds, because I was involved with activism and community organizing. But I noticed that many of us were showing up in those spaces due to our shared pain and our shared trauma. But I also recognized that if we were not addressing the healing of that pain and trauma, we were actually compounding it,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's when I kind of went to go study conflict transformation, like instead of seeing, how we can change the systems and the laws that frankly were designed to do what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how can we use that energy to pour into ourselves and one another and start creating collectively some of the solutions that we need holistically,
Mm-hmm.
in ways that honor us, mind, body, spirit, and not just only focusing on changing laws and policies.
There you go.
So that led me into the conflict transformation and healing justice frameworks, and understanding my work in the world from that broader perspective. And then coming back to Dayton, I realized like it's a cultural shift that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the first step is education. And so
Yes.
that's kind of where I kind of took the approach of education because I could come back and say, oh, we need to do it like this, we need to do it like that, and bring back some practices and things. But without the education, it doesn't really make sense. I was like, if we're actually talking about a cultural shift, it has to come from inside of people. It's not going to come because I told you this or that.
Yes.
So my approach to education is in the circle. So I'm actually just asking questions and, inviting everybody to share their own perspectives, their own experiences, because that's where the wisdom truly lies, so that we can see together, what the patterns are, what is needed, and how we can, move forward together.
I love that so much. You brought up just the first step is really education. Unfortunately, I believe that we're all on this journey of rediscovering ourselves, being, ripped of just the knowledge of ourselves, the knowledge of our culture and who we are has placed us in a space of, I want to say, we're kind of paralyzed in a way of how to move. What do we do? So I truly believe education is so important. And you being a culture educator, how has that been able to impact your influence on those that are lacking culture education in order, to have that for their healing?
Yeah, it was actually really beautiful because it was a former professor of mine who wanted me to take over some of her classes, and she was teaching cultural humility for working with youth at Wright State. And I said no the first two times, and then eventually I was like, okay, so that's what I call cultural education. Is where the class that I had been teaching was called cultural humility.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, most of my students at Wright State were predominantly white students who have been told their whole lives that they don't have culture. And so it creates this dynamic because these are those who are going to be future teachers in the schools. So it's like my approach was trying to support them in understanding culture and understanding how they've been conditioned to perpetuate a certain culture or to take on a certain culture and cultural identity that
Mm-hmm.
is actually harming them and their future students,
Yes.
harming their ability to actually create a welcoming environment for diverse students, of different cultures. So instead of just looking at other cultures as, like, oh, they have culture and I don't have culture, it's like, no, we all have culture.
Yeah.
But also we can choose. That's the piece. We don't have to be passive recipients of culture. We don't have to say like whatever somebody outside of a they, like dominant culture, society, media, whoever tells us that we're supposed to be based on the color of our skin, etc., racial categories and stuff. We get to decide who that we are choosing to be based on conscious awareness of our impact on one
Mm-hmm.
another and what we need in order to thrive individually and collectively.
Mm-hmm.
And so having these conversations, with my predominantly white students was really powerful, because many of them like never had the opportunity to even think about, who they want to be and examine the ways maybe they've been conditioned into um, cultural behaviors and belief systems that are actually harming, them and others, and stopping them from being who they want to be in this world, which is like productive and helpful, to all. And then taking those same concepts of cultural humility out into the community, working
Mm-hmm.
with predominantly communities of color, was really beautiful as well, because we've all been indoctrinated and told, we're all facing lots of conditioning from the outside of who we're told to be, what we're supposed to do, what we're supposed to think, and not only that, but maybe we just feel like, well, this is how it is. This is how it is. Everyone around me is doing this, believes these things. And so that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to reflect, if anyone's ever been to the heart community, many of us are artists, and we're people who already kind of feel on the fringes of our cultures,
Mm-hmm.
where there's aspects of our cultures that we're like, I don't necessarily fit into that aspect of tradition. I'm a creative, like I want to create new. Why can't we do it differently?
Yeah.
So creating a space where we could, honor our differences, but then also honor our cultures and our traditions, in a place of reverence, instead of feeling like forced into something or trapped into something that we didn't get to choose for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really just about that across the board, no matter who I've worked with. it's about self-determination.
Mm,
And then that's where that healing comes from, because now I know that I'm not in subjugation anymore. I get to choose. And from that place of choice, I can open up to, like, oh, I can honor, where I've come from. I can honor the roots of my cultures, because I know I'm growing beyond them anyway. I'm going to produce my fruits. I get to be creative. I get to be an artist. That's what God wants from me, as a
mm,
creative being on this planet. So when I know that I don't have to feel forced into something, then I'm more open to, um, honoring and having reverence for it.
exactly. You're more willing to flow with the process. I don't think anyone likes to be or feel forced into doing anything. Like, um and within that, it kind of makes it more even hard to really get into what it is exactly that you want to get into, because now you're feeling subject to only taking up whatever someone has told you to do or what someone told you you are. So I love that. I wanted to kind of break down like healing in the village, right? So I named the show Healing in the Village, Restoring Ourselves, right? But what does healing in the village means to you personally?
Um, I think, like, it's this idea of, that we are reflections of one another. And, many of us have been harmed, or, have some kind of negative experience in relationships,
Hmm.
any kind of relationships. And so, we feel that we need to isolate in
Yeah.
order to heal. And I think that being in solitude, is important. I live here by myself. um, But that being said, like, there is a next healing potential, when we come together.
Mm,
And particularly when we're looking at healing historical harms, right? Like, we're talking about healing generational harms, like enslavement, like genocide. These are things, colonization. So when we understand what happened, that we were systematically, put in positions to, harm ourselves and one another, which
mm,
eroded our trust, in one another, and eroded our, willingness to surrender to intimacy with one another. So when it comes to healing now, like, that's what we're healing.
yes.
We need to heal our ability to relate to one another. And so I think that's really why healing in the village is so important, because that's where, the harm occurred. Like, if you have a wound on your arm, like, the doctor is going to go to the wound to heal. The doctor is not going to go to your knee to
Yeah.
heal what's on your arm. You got to go to the wound, apply what is necessary to the wound itself in order for that wound to heal. So
Mm,
from my background and understanding, like, we have to go to the village because that's where the wound is.
I love that. I love that. And it just makes me think about how much, like, even though that solitude, listen, now, once you really come to the power of knowing thyself, that solitude is, you love it. I just want to be in solitude all the time. And it's okay to a certain extent, right? Because I truly believe that once we have awakened to who we are, and we have, also awakened the powers that's within us, it's our duty to take it to our community. It's our duty to now, okay, you started your healing journey. Let's go out and continue to get everybody else to get on the same path, right? So, what role does community play in helping and restoring mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when you were talking about solitude, it's like, yeah, like we get to know ourselves so much better in solitude.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but ain't nothing like a relationship, to show you what you didn't see when you was by yourself,
There you go, that mirror.
right? Because we be, like doing our own thing, just going like, because we get to live our life the way we want. We're not necessarily challenged,
Mm-hmm.
by the other when we're just with ourselves. Like I can eat the food that I want, I can wake up and go to sleep when I want, I could do what I want, right? But in relationship with others, now you're navigating a whole other person. They have their own needs, they have their own perspectives, they
Mm-hmm.
have their own path and journey. And being able to coexist together, and not just coexist, but love,
Mm-hmm.
operate in love when it's difficult, when there's challenges, and bringing, it feels like alchemy. It's like, okay, there's this tension here, there's conflict here. These are things that happen when you bring, when relationships, right? Like when you bring people together. And so even just on that level of the interpersonal relationships, not even talking about a healing circle or anything yet, but just your day-to-day relationships, if you have learned within yourself how to cultivate energies of love, energies of compassion, energies of forgiveness, without bypassing, right? Like you had to go through the anger, you had to go through the pain, you had to go through all of that to get to the other side. And once you learn how to do that within yourself, bringing it to your relationships. And I've experienced this on both sides, where somebody else that I've been in relationship with has been able to alchemize,
Yeah.
the messiness of the relationship into love. And that awakened something in me to where I've been able to do that in relationship with others as well. Like there's this messiness, like we don't know what to do. And then through my own inner alchemy, I've been able to cultivate energies of love and compassion and forgiveness and
Mm-hmm.
bring that back to the relationship. And I've seen how transformative that can be, like I said, from both sides of the coin. So I think that's really the essence of where, um the relationships, the relational piece comes into the healing.
Mm. I love that. When we really think about it, it's really this just wanting to come out of shell type of energy, but not knowing how because we've been so conditioned, one thing to not trust each other. So it kind of, binds us to, be okay sometimes, but not understanding that it's bigger than you. So when we, what we have to do in our healing as well. So coming and going into your communities and being able to assist them. And I can't force anyone to do it, but those that are on the same plane that are ready for that healing. So it's to um, for you, like, how can we begin to trust and have unity within our communities?
Trust is a really interesting thing. I actually went through like an entire program. Like I'm a community trust building fellow. um, and there are in that program, like I learned certain things that you can do to build trust across difference. But ultimately, what I've learned, after bringing a lot of those tools to the heart community and trying to live it out, and very intentionally for the past 5 years at the heart, what I realized is that trust is about trusting ourselves and about trusting God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where trust lies. And it's really interesting. It might sound like kind of cynical, but in the Sikh scriptures, one of my friends, she actually reads our language. I don't read it. And so she reads it and she kind of translates things for me. And she reminds me that, like, so I wish I could say actually the scripture, but I can't. I don't know which scripture it is, but I know there's a principle that basically says, like, don't trust anybody but God, because people are all imperfect, essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
another way of saying that is trust people to be who they are.
Ooh.
I think it's like we we may have some kind of expectation, and then when people don't meet that expectation, then we say we can't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
But we're holding ourselves back once again from being in that alchemy of life. Like, life is always changing and transforming, but when we get into that energy of, like, I don't trust you, that's not an open energy, that is a closed energy, right? And I've definitely been there, so I'm not, like, absolving myself of this, but I just try to remember, um, if trust is what I want, how can I cultivate that within myself? How can I trust myself to navigate whatever life brings my way?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever challenges come my way, whatever energies come my way, and remembering that it's not the person, it's the energy that
Ooh.
that person may be carrying at this moment. But we as people are not finite beings, right? We are energies, we are spirits living human experiences. And we come across and we embody different energies throughout our lives. So if I could try to remember, like, okay, it's not you. You are carrying an energy of, jealousy or of hatred or whatever it may be that is causing me to feel like I can't trust you. It's like, okay, where can I source trust from? Can I source trust from trusting myself to navigate life? Can I
Mm-hmm.
source trust from navigating God to bring every situation into my life for my betterment only? Can I trust you to be who you are? And then that's it. And that's it. Then I don't have to try to control what are you going to do in the future. No matter what you do, I'm going to handle it the way that I need to handle it.
Yes.
I'm going to keep it moving.
I love that. I love that. And again, it just goes back to that. I think with everything, like even just me being in a nation, like we're taught self first, self first, self first, self first, then others. So within everything that we want to cultivate, anything that we want to change, is always a reflection back to self. What do you have to cultivate? Cultivate this trust that you have in doing.
Is that too loud? You want me to mute myself?
Because someone said it sound like animal. Now you got we got back.
It's not an animal. Someone's cutting their yard. But, when you cut your yard, you've got a huge machine over here. It's not like no little lawnmower. I'll mute when I'm not speaking.
I'm rolling, y'all, because I'm like, dang, is that like an elephant or something back there? I know you in Costa Rica, so. Oh, like, okay, so wait. Now I gotta remember what I was saying. But yes, so and please forgive me if I misplaced what I had said. However, just going back in and understanding self first when it comes to even in any endeavor that we're trying to get into and in any type of issues that we have to go back to self, right? Self and learning who we are. So praise be to Allah. And listen, you guys, if you guys are enjoying this episode just as well as I am, please, 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 please share your support today. Okay. Support Healing with Angelica podcast by texting the word donate to 937-313-2466. All donations will be towards the continuation of Healing with Angelica's podcast and the building of Healing with Angelica Community Healing Center. I love you all. Now let's get back to today's episode, Healing in the Village, restoring ourselves through cultural and connection. So I want to get into I really want to get into just the background of your culture and how it shaped your healing journey. You know, you said being an immigrant and coming from England and coming down here to little old Dayton, Beaver Creek, and then um you going through, certain health challenges, like just within that, how has your cultural background shaped your healing journey?
Yeah, so well, my faith community is the Sikh community. So I'm a Sikh, and as Sikhs, we see ourselves as spiritual warriors.
Mhm.
And so what that means is our path is one where we are meant to be in community. Um, it specifically is taught to us that the goal in this human life is not only to go off and sit under a tree and find connection with God alone, but to be the connection with God in community with others.
Mhm.
Bring that light into your family, into your society. And so that is our mandate is
Mhm.
to be with others, essentially what we're talking about today. And that, and also to just kind of this higher perspective of like the purpose of life, right? Like that's something I was raised with from a child. So thinking about injustices and understanding like with 9/11 and understanding that I'm sovereign. And so, we were taught not to put any nation above God. And
Mhm.
so, like at that time with 9/11, there was a lot of nationalism happening. It was like American flags and all this type of thing.
Mhm.
And you're supposed to like prove your loyalty to a nation at that time.
Mhm.
And uh, I was able to see beyond that and see the contradictions and everything that was being told to me by the mainstream media and the news and all that, because my culture had taught me already that I'm sovereign
Mhm.
and my only allegiance is to God, not to any form of written law or anything like that. Now, I'm not saying I'm here to break laws, but what I'm saying is that I don't need to worship any other entity, other than God. And so, that kind of just allowed me to like have a critical mind and maintain a level of like sovereignty inside of myself. And then as I got older, as I mentioned, I had health problems and things, and I ended up having to change my entire diet. And as I was learning more about natural healing and in order to heal myself, it was the same herbs and spices that I grew up with in the Indian food that I was seeing in all these books. I was like, wait, I've heard of that. I know that one. We
Mhm.
use that one, and so it's kind of beautiful because growing up, like I rejected Indian food. I just wanted to eat like McDonald's and things like that. I wanted to eat what my classmates were eating. But then as I got older, those very foods ended up being what was healing to my body. And then it was healing to my spirit as well, because the same culture, right? Like had rejected my culture and I was trying to reject my roots in order to fit in. And it was like, no, girl,
Mm.
your roots got the medicines in them.
Okay.
Like you got the sauce already. You never had nothing to be ashamed of, and then here we are in 2025, and there's so many aspects of Indian culture, South Asian culture that are being celebrated and sought after across the globe,
Mhm.
and so just I'm so grateful for the culture that I was born into. And I'm grateful to have the experience, also to have lived outside of um, my homeland, to then be able to have a fresh perspective on my culture, right?
Mm.
And be able to honor my culture in a different way, having been stripped of. the experience of growing up there and then having to come back because I needed it in order to heal. Um, and so, yeah, I think there's so much more in there. There's so much more in our scriptures, our Sikh scriptures, that has been a guiding light, even like the connection with nature.
Yeah.
Our scriptures talk about nature. Our scriptures also talk about other faith practices. It was during a time where Islam and Hinduism were the dominant religions in India. And so our gurus, our people who wrote our scriptures, like took wisdom from other traditions as well, and shared that it's all traditions essentially are seeking the same thing in the end. So it
Mhm.
doesn't matter what language you use or what word you use to call God. The end goal is the same. So there's no need to like convert anybody or try to change people from their path. Allow everyone to be on the path that they're on, knowing in your heart and soul that we're all one. We're
Mhm.
all going to the same place. And that has really just, opened up so much for my ability to work with people of cultures outside of my own, because I'm not looking down on anybody's path or culture. Um, because that's the way I was raised.
I love it. Praise be to Allah. Let me see here. Brothers Tony, is this a question? Okay, yeah, my brother, I want to post this comment. It's not a question, but it's a nice comment. He said, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches us that nationalism is an impediment. Did I say that right?
Impediment.
Impediment. Impediment within self. It prevents us from building the strong bonds of unity with others. I agree. Thank you for that comment.
Mm.
Yes, I love it. Um, whew, it's so much that can go just in to this in general. On your journey, just as a cultural educator and being an immigrant, have you experienced any adversities coming into, Ohio, where you resonate at, to express that cultural background?
Oh yeah. um, you know, as it's no secret right now, there's a big attack on like DEI and all these type of things. And I never kind of felt like that was my field, but that's how it's categorized. If you're talking about anything like based in identity or whatever, they put it in this category of DEI. So like a lot of people are fearful
Mm,
of talking around culture and identity, just because there's so much propaganda.
yes.
So usually we'll get one or two, each time I teach the class, get one or two students who, write me a bad review at the end of the semester saying that I was racist and that I was like pushing my personal agenda, essentially.
Mm,
Whereas my approach is this is my personal beliefs and this is my background, and I forefront that. But I do that not to say that you need to follow me, but to give you the spaciousness to then tell me who you are, what your culture is. So I do that to model what it looks like to really know who you are and express that. But sometimes it gets perceived as me pushing my agenda,
mm,
um, for people who are maybe not so grounded and confident in being able to express, who they are, where they're coming from.
mhm.
And maybe they see me in a position of power, being a professor or, even in the community at the heart. And so when I show up in a position of power with that level of like self embodiment and embodiment of my culture, it has come off to people in the past as like you're pushing your agenda kind of
Yeah.
thing.
So how
Um,
able to I'm sorry, were you finished? Sorry.
well, I was gonna share it, but yeah, go
No,
ahead.
share. Because I
Well,
wanted
I was gonna say the other half of it
yeah,
has been like
I'm
this fear around the Eastern philosophies and Eastern way of thinking, just what I call xenophobia,
Mm,
fear of the other, right? And we know that that comes from even from like the wars that have been fought in Asia and this propaganda that has been pushed in the United States that Asians cannot be trusted, and there's always some like that. There's some kind of secret agendas that Asians have, or whatever, masterminds, and
mm,
so showing up, with embodying my culture and having a non-Abrahamic faith, in a lot of faith spaces, as you know, Dayton is a heavily, predominantly Christian cultural area, and so having a non Abrahamic faith in these faith communities,
mm,
sometimes there is fear of, you know, uh, when you're using other words to describe God, or you're sharing other pathways of spirituality, and also us having such a lot of Eastern philosophies are very open, like I mentioned. Like, it doesn't matter to us what practice it is, it's all going to the same pace. So we're very open in
mm,
terms of like our spirituality and our spiritual heart. Whereas many people are taught to be very narrow in their spiritual path, and that's the way, like the way should be narrow, and anything outside of that, is of the devil, or is bad or whatever. So that is definitely something that I've encountered a lot, as well.
yeah. And you made me think of a question just within that. So, um, how have you been able to like instead of, I guess we can say, if people may feel like you may be coming off as pushing your way of life, how have you been able to kind of, counteract counteract act that, with the way people may take it? How have you been able to handle that?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, my approach to my work is in circle. And I approach my work with cultural humility. And so
Okay.
I go into spaces where other people are practicing their cultures, and I listen and I learn first before I say anything.
Hmm.
And that teaches me, what is important to this group of people, what are their values, what are their struggles, what are they seeking towards, what do they feel they need, all of these kind of things, so that I can be aware of that when I'm talking and I'm engaging. That is, to me, one of the best things that I can do, is approach people with humility for who they are. Um, And also, I use the circle process. So if you
Hmm.
actually come and participate in anything that I do, I'm listening 70% of the time when I'm talking 30% of the time, because we have a talking piece and I may share something and then I pass the talking piece and then everybody else shares
Yes.
before I share again. I'm not responding to each person or anything. I'm letting the thing do its thing. It's not about me, actually. And
Mm,
so if you actually show up and you experience me and my work, it's not about me pushing in an agenda. If anything, my agenda is everybody to be more empowered in themselves,
hmm.
you know. So there's still people out there that don't trust me and who think that I have an agenda and who think that I um power trip and these kind of things. These are things that have been, told to me, and I'm not trying to convert those people's perspectives. That's their perspective.
Hmm.
um but as far as what do I do, is I just try to stay in alignment with my values
Yes.
of cultural humility, and ensuring that I hold that everywhere I go, because I know that um having once you embody power, that power can be corrupting. Like, we've seen it over and over again how power has corrupted people, right? So that's just a personal practice of mine, is navigating, okay, as I develop more power inside of myself and as I have power outside of myself as well, right? Like I have um, a lot of privileges, I have a lot of resources and connections and things. So I'm able to do things that other people aren't able to do. And so constantly being aware of that and having that self awareness and then having that humility as I'm dealing with anybody else outside of myself. I think that's really the best I can do.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, just continuing being that example. And also, again, humility. Humility is so important when we're dealing with, our people. And having patience with them, understanding that there may be things that they may not understand. And, if when the time is right, they may get to understand, but it's not your job to, again, like, we can't we can't force, you know, our perspectives on people. You know what I'm saying? We just have to be able to, drop that, I would say drop a little seed and, allow that seed to, germinate if it's, in its right plotting space, right? Talking about gardening now. I
Mhm.
love it. I love it. And if you guys are enjoying this episode just as well as I am, go ahead and put them fire emojis in the comment section below. We getting real cultural around here. Okay. So I want to ask you these few questions before we end today's show. Now, there is a certain type of balance that one must have when it comes to being on your own personal divine healing journey and also being able to be that light in the example for others. So, how, in your perspective, how do we hold space for both individual healing and also collective liberation?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think it's always going to be like a negotiation, right? Like when we're talking about balancing the scales, like the scales don't just stay like that. They go like this and like this and like this,
Mhm.
right? And so sometimes you are going to have to pour heavier into one side and pour heavier into the other side later on. Um, I think for me, it's also just getting clear on like the nature of my relationships.
Mhm.
Not each relationship is meant to hold the same purpose in your life. And so understanding like who in my life has the capacity to be there when I need, when I have zero. I'm on zero and I'm just like, I just need to crumble. Like I ain't got it. It ain't gonna sound pretty. I'm gonna be sniffling and all that. And I'm just need to crumble, but I need to be witnessed by somebody else or I need to be held by somebody else. Like who in my life is capable of holding me in those moments, you know? And then who in my life is it more of like I'm going to engage with you in the work, like I'm going to sit in circle with you. Right. And one thing I love about circle, just to put it out there, like when I'm holding circle, I'm participating in the circle too.
Yes.
It's not like I just pass it around and everyone else answers vulnerably and I'm just sitting there. Like, no, I participate in the circle. So anybody who sits in circle with me is gifted with my vulnerability just as I'm gifted with theirs.
Ooh.
Um, so I think that's the other piece, is like being willing to be vulnerable and to share when we are in these spaces with other people. Sometimes uh we become these like healing personalities and
Mm.
then we feel like we always have to have the answer, so then we
Yes.
don't get to be in that moment of like, I don't know, man, I'm struggling with the same thing you are, and just being in the thing with the people. Right. So circle is a practice that allows me to like be in the thing with people. But then also having the discernment to know um, what the capacity is of each person that I'm in relationship with, and um, what the boundaries are that are necessary in that relationship for us to have the healthiest exchange, based on my needs and based on their needs, based on my unique journey, based on their unique journey. based on my capacity, based on their capacity, all of that. Um, so that's something I've had to learn over time, especially things can get really gray when you're doing the healing work in a community is your community, right? Because then you may actually have multiple roles with one particular person, so it's like in this setting, I'm a teacher, but in this other setting, I'm a sister or a cousin or a friend or a neighbor. And like, how do you navigate having these multiple roles with people? Can be really challenging, because when you look at like a psychologist or a therapist, like they have very clear boundaries. Like there's professional standards and boundaries that are there that enable them to be of the best support that they can to their clients, right? And I think I heard recently, like if you're a therapist or counselor or something, like you can't have like a romantic relationship with your client for up to like 2 or 3 years after they stop seeing you.
Mm.
So there's things like that, where it's like those things are in place for a reason so that you don't get confused on your role and you're able to show up the best you can in that one particular role that you're being called to for this person. Um, so just knowing, like who is my peer who like I can come to, and when I don't have the answer and I'm breaking down and I'm a mess, and they can come to me in that, and then who's somebody that I want to bring my best self to them at all times, because that's who I'm being called to be for them, you know.
I love that. It makes me think about how we're all in a way being used, and it doesn't have to be the negative use. Like even God is using us right now for, to help his world, or to bring in what it is that he wants to bring in. So we're all being used in some type of capacity, but it's all about also being able to find, okay, well, let's go into the community, or find our tribe, as they can say, that can be able to help me, and it also assists me on that healing journey. That's why when it comes to healing as an individual, and come in healing, helping and assisting in healing the community, that's a whole oneness thing. It's not really an individual work. Yes, you heal, you have your solitude days and you chill, then you come back and you bring it to your tribe, right? So within that, again, like you said, that like you're gonna have your days and things happen, but you have your tribe to help. Okay, she needs some poured in her cup. Let me go ahead and add to that. So we find needs of each other to help balance each other out. So I love that so much. I want to get into the last question here. What's your vision for the future of healing within our communities?
Well, what just came, the first thing that came to my mind was Queen Afua, and I know you just had her on here a couple weeks ago. I was blessed to actually be trained by her during COVID, so I'm a Emerald Green Practitioner, and sell her products at the Heart in Dayton, the Lovelocks HQ. So if anyone's in Dayton looking for Queen Afua products, you can go over there. Um, but as she says, having like a healer in every home, and having like, essentially everyone having a circle that they can go to, and having their people that they can go to, I think is like a really beautiful vision that the circles may look different. Like the circle may happen on the basketball court. The circle may happen like out in the field, in the garden. The circle may happen around a fire, in the kitchen. So the circle may happen in different places for different people. And just knowing that you have a place to go, you have people that you can count on, to have that level of intimacy, depth, vulnerability, connection, and accountability, and responsibility, right? Like, so where we can cultivate our sense of responsibility to the land, to
Mm,
the Most High, and our highest version of self in relationship with others.
that's such a beautiful vision. Just us being able to really come together and really heal. We have to be able to also look within self, take accountability, and also stand up in our responsibilities to make that happen. It's so important. So I love that, sis. Praise be to Allah. Well, I just want to say thank you, Darsheel. Hold on, wait. Darsheel. Say it right. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, everybody know when it comes to names, Sister Angelica may get it wrong. All right. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today to just talk about this beautiful topic, healing in the village, restoring ourselves through and connection. I also like to thank my amazing healing tribe and joining us today. I pray that this episode was informative, valuable, and of course, healing to you all. Also, be sure to share, like, follow, and subscribe so you won't miss out on any upcoming episodes on any of your favorite podcast station. Closing the Gap broadcast on YouTube. Knowledge for Life on YouTube and Healing with Angelica on Facebook and YouTube help spread the light of healing to others in need. Also, I just want to give you guys a heads up. Healing with Angelica will now be every other Thursday. Every other Thursday. So, I'll be coming up with a new update of the time of our shows. So be on a lookout for that to stay updated. Also, if you're ready to start your healing journey and don't know where to start, Healing with Angelica is here to assist. Get started on your healing journey today with my one-on-one The Healing Journey program by texting the word ready to 937-313-2466. Within that, you will receive a free 15-minute consultation. And also with that, that comes with the free The Healing Journey checklist. Also, if you would like to, if you all are looking for a sacred place to come together and heal, Healing with Angelica now has the Healing Circle. Again, I would like to invite you all to the Healing Circle, a sacred place for us all, men and women, to collectively heal together. The Healing Circles are every first of the month. So, whenever the first is, it can be on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Whenever the first of the month is, that is when it will be. It's 6 p.m. Eastern. So to join the Healing Circle, just text Circle to 937-313-2466, and I will send information on that to join. We will have our first one May 1st. So next Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern, please join us. Also, you guys, my new ebook, Thrive, is now available for purchase. Again, my goal is to get this ebook to over 100 young women and girls before the end of 2025. So, listen, if you are ready to learn how to reconnect with self and God, get your copy today by texting the word Thrive to 937-313-2466. Now, before we end today's show, can you please leave us with some closing remarks?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. This is really wonderful. I'm so grateful every time I get an opportunity, like being all the way out here in Costa Rica. I wasn't trying to like ditch everybody, I still want to be connected. So anytime I get the opportunity to connect back in is such a blessing and it feeds me so much. So I'm really grateful for that. And if anyone is interested in coming to Costa Rica, like I said, I've been coming back and forth here for over a decade. I have a lot of relationships that I've been building with local communities, the Afro Caribbean community, and I'm starting to build with the Bribri Indigenous community as well. And so, if anybody would like to be hosted by Circle of Roots here for a culturally rooted travel experience, feel free to reach out to me as well because I would like to start hosting one-on-one retreats for people based on whatever it is that you're seeking. I can kind of make all your bookings for you here, and utilize the relationships and the connections that I've been building here, so that that your money's going right back into the community, in a responsible way. So just wanted to put that out there for anyone who may be interested in that. And I think with that, connecting point with that, with just a final comment, would be that nature, all of the plants and all of the animals are also our community too.
Mm.
There's so much connection and healing that can occur both ways, when we realize our interconnectedness with Mother Earth, and all of her babies, right? And yeah, so just want to encourage everybody to, if you feel like, oh, I haven't found my tribe yet, or, I'm still working on trusting people and all this type of thing, like, go outside, build a relationship with the plant. If you're in Dayton, there's 5 rivers. Start connecting with the stories and the sacredness of the land right where you're at. Dayton in particular has there's a lot of sacred land in Dayton, and those 5 rivers have a really incredible history of bringing people together across differences. And the indigenous roots are very strong in Ohio. So
Mm.
I really encourage people to start doing some research and just connecting and tuning in and listening to nature as a guide, while you're on this path trying to build these relationships with other humans.
Yes, yes. Oh my God. It's nothing like that communal relationship with nature. We have such a strong relationship with nature that we don't know it. That's why it's so important that we take that time, just go outside, ground, go listen to the birds, actually feel the earth, right? So I love that. Now, I have scrolling down circleofroots.org. Is that where our people can reach you at? If not, please share your social media platform, wherever our people can connect with you at.
Yep. You can go to my website, www.circleofroots.org or .shop. And on Instagram, it's just Darsheel Kaur, my name. And on Facebook is the same thing, Darsheel Kaur. And my email is darsheelkaur@gmail.com. So please reach out on any of those platforms, or go to my website and read a little bit more about what I got going on. Yeah, please stay in touch.
Yay! Praise be to Allah. Ashe, Ashe. Love it. So thank you all so much for joining us today for this beautiful topic. And we leave you all as we came. Assalamu alaikum. Peace, healing, and light.
Peace, peace.
Welcome to Healing with Angelica.
Meditation.